Hey guys, it's Peanut and Ice Cream Bar. So I am here to talk today with you guys about sewing, and this is going to be a really basic kind of little series that I'm going to do about drafting patterns and clothing quality and how to sew some certain things, and hopefully you guys will learn a little bit. I have not really seriously been into sewing since I decided to not go to fashion school anymore because it was a horrible nightmare. But hopefully I can remember enough to pass on the little things to you. I will say to those of you who are very apt at sewing, one, this probably will not be any interesting or new information for you, but I know my process is not the most scientific in the world, but it's, you know, the way that I enjoy creating, and I figure I'm not making human clothes that doesn't really need to be perfect or make any sense as long as I can get it on my doll. So we are going to start off talking a little bit about quality. I know that's not the most exciting thing in the world, but my hope is through these videos I can help you guys with like future projects rather than just teaching you how to sew like a single thing and then moving on. So not terribly exciting maybe, but it's good to get the basics down first and then we can move into other stuff. So when we're talking about quality of clothing, there really isn't like a set standard for ball joint dolls. There's just different prices, but the prices don't always reflect the quality, though they often do. So for ease of like communication and understanding in these videos, we're going to talk about doll quality as 4 different categories: A, B, C, and then D and below. A quality clothing offers superior craftsmanship and detail. Everything is to scale, there's no mistakes, and there are little, if any, revealing seams. B quality clothing is really exceptional quality, whether it's handmade or company made. The construction is thoughtful, it's clean, the construction's really solid, and there are details that have nothing to do with the actual structure of the garment that are there just to add some nice realism. C-level clothing for handmade clothes are usually still well made, it's just using your more basic construction skills, and there's not really any added detail or element that makes it stand out. For companies, it's going to be similar criteria, really basic construction, but also with details that actually take away from the realism, such as this Velcro closure in the back of that shiny purple shirt. And then we have D quality clothing and below. This is usually items that are incredibly amateurish in their construction and design. They're damaged or unfinished, like that pair of shorts at the bottom there, or they are items of clothing that are not to scale or lack incredible amounts of realism, such as items of clothing made for other dolls of a similar size but different proportions, like this blue shirt here. So why did I want to go through all of this with you? Well, first of all, I think it's helpful to know where to spend your money, especially in a hobby like this, which is kind of pricey. So it's just something to think about, and then something to kind of think about for yourself, where you want to fit in on that scale. You know, it's just a different level of investment into sewing, which is a skill that does take a very long time to master, and certainly I am not a master of it, and most people are going to continue learning throughout their entire lives because no one has time to just like sit and sew all the time unless that's your job and you're getting paid for that, so thumbs up. So originally this was going to be a separate video, but I thought, you know what, let's just tack it on to the end of this one because it's not that much information. Since we were kind of going over the quality of different types of ball joint doll clothing, I thought we would start and just jump right into what you might need when you're getting into sewing, well, what you absolutely will need, and then things that are nice to have in the future, depending on where you think you're gonna be and like what quality group where you want to be sewing. The first thing that you should definitely invest in, and really at the beginning the only thing you should spend a lot of money on, are your sewing scissors, because these need to be sharp and they need to stay sharp and they need to only cut fabric in an ideal world. These are definitely going to be your best investment when you just start out sewing. Obviously the next thing you'll need is fabric. You really don't need to look into buying expensive fabric. I usually buy remnants when I'm sewing for my ball joint dolls. The ideal, especially for beginners, is something that has a little bit of stretch, but not something that is so stretchy it's basically elastic, because this is actually pretty hard to sew. Of course, and please excuse me, this is so embarrassing, no one ever looks at my thread but me, but some thread! It's super messy in here. Keep your thread in a better state than I keep mine. You really don't need a lot of thread when you're starting out, or that great quality of thread. You know, black, white, brown, maybe one other color that you think you might use a lot, but your thread really doesn't have to be that great of quality when you're starting out. You want really nice quality thread for humans because we are running and jumping and sitting and driving and doing all kinds of things throughout the day, so you know, your thread really needs to hold your clothing together, whereas a ball joint doll is not doing any of those things. You just sometimes take them out and like very carefully position them and then take some pictures and put them away. So their clothing does not need to stand up to anywhere near the rough and tumble that human clothes need to stand up to, so definitely not something to put your money into right away. And then finally, absolute necessity, you will need some needles. And again, you don't need expensive needles. This is not an essential thing, but I absolutely 1,000 million times recommend you get these pins. So many pins. And get them like in massive bulk. This is 300 and I'm pretty sure I've lost like 50% or more of these, which is always kind of disturbing because then you're walking around and if you have a carpet, you're walking around and you're like, where is a pin? The thing is, once you've stepped on a couple pins, it really doesn't bother you that much anymore. You're just like, oh look at me, I'm pulling a pin out of my foot, how about that? What's for lunch? Finally, as we get into drafting patterns and things like that, it's definitely helpful to have things like fabric chalk, seam rippers are really nice to have, scrap paper, and like some Sharpies or pencils or pens or whatever you like to use. All of that stuff is helpful, but definitely not necessary for beginners. I hope that this very brief introduction, informationally, maybe not in a time sense, was helpful to some of you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you when we start drafting some patterns.